And that something is going to be the recession of 1937. So if we take a step back here as we're getting ready to look at this next slide, what we can see here is, can the government fix the economy, and not when it tries to circumvent the Constitution, right? So no. Essentially, Roosevelt wants to pack the court to make it friendly to his presidency. You can't do that. It's against the rules. So he's not able to do that. And the only reason he's able to continue being popular and continue getting New Deal programs across is because of this recession of 1937. What happens here is that Roosevelt, in 1936, we're going to see him raise taxes and try and cut spending in an attempt to kind of take the government out of the economy a little bit, dial it back, a little less government in the economy, a little more laissez-faire. And the reaction there is going to be people having less to spend. And we know how difficult that can be. If the government takes away the jobs that it creates with the Civilian Conservation Corps, or the WPA, or any of the programs that we talked about, well, then they have to get a job in private business. And there's just not enough people hiring right yet in private business to really put all these Americans back to work. So what happens is, when Roosevelt tries to cut his deficit spending, he's going to raise taxes to do that for Social Security. He's going to cut spending. But unfortunately, he cuts it too much and raises it too much, which is going to lead to unemployment. And you can see that here, right? Unemployment goes up, 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 up. Peaks in 1933, right? The winter of 1932-33. And then it falls as the government employs people. We hit 1937. Roosevelt cuts spending. We're not going to hire as many Americans for government programs anymore, and we're going to raise taxes for Social Security, and then whoop, unemployment heads back up. This is the recession of 1937. And Roosevelt is going to say, well, time out, 30 seconds. Clearly the country isn't ready for the government to totally be out of the economy yet. We're not ready for laissez-faire economies. We may never be, according to Roosevelt. So he's going to look for a group of people that he can target to help, and he's going to focus on those that are particularly impoverished, the poor of the poor. So while we see that the government does have a tough time helping and fixing the economy when it raises taxes too much or when it cuts spending at the wrong time, we are going to see Roosevelt be able to bounce back and help the economy when he focuses on the poorest of the poor Americans, particularly those Americans who are impoverished in the South and who are African American, who we know aren't doing as well as whites. So two laws are going to be passed here, two things he's going to do to help them. One of them is going to be the Farm Security Administration, and essentially this helps both poor white Southerners and black sharecroppers. What it does is it gives those folks loans. So if you're a tenant farmer, if you're a sharecropper, you can get a loan to purchase your own farm. That's a big deal, because it's really going to help poor African Americans and poor whites in the South get the loans they need to get off the land that they're renting and start to make some of their own money and keep some of that profit for themselves and not sell it and give it off as rent. The other thing that's going to start here is going to be the Fair Labor Standards Act, which does abolish child labor finally, fully, completely in some jobs. And it establishes an 8-hour workday and getting paid time and a half for overtime. And it even establishes something that we'll take a look at as we go forward in class, the minimum wage. But it also helps, as you can see, right, the poorest of the poor. This is going to help poor whites, it's going to help Native Americans, it's going to help poor blacks, it's going to help poor Hispanics, it's going to help factory workers, it's going to help farmers. It helps all kinds of people, men, women. Everyone benefits from the Fair Labor Standards Act. So what we're going to see here with these two programs is that Roosevelt is going to be able to get those Americans back to work. And you can see that by 1938, after these two major laws are passed, we're going to see unemployment return to its decline all the way to 1943, when it's well below 5%. So this is going to bring us to the very end of the New Deal era. These last New Deal reforms are going to come to a close in 1939, in part because of World War II, but also because Republicans and other conservative Democrats are really going to be blocking any other New Deal legislation to come through. What they've done here, and what Roosevelt has done, is he's rescued the country, And essentially what conservatives and Democrats are going to be saying in the South, especially white Southern Democrats, is that it's time to dial it back. It's time to stop helping the government or the economy through the government. We need to find a way to prevent ourselves from getting too close to, say, socialism. The other thing I want to point out here is that the Farm Security Administration is particularly successful, almost too successful, in that it helps a good number of African Americans. That's why you see Republicans and white Southern Democrats teaming up. Essentially, you take all those people that were a part of the New Deal coalition and you break them up a little bit and you say, there's some cracks beginning to form here. White Southern Democrats getting angry at the presence of African Americans in that coalition. We don't want to help them too much, at least in their mind. So where does this leave us then at the end of the 1930s as the Great Depression is beginning to come to a close?